welcome to a special episode of the Full Moon Show where we're going to kind of go back and take a look at Resistance 2's development and talk about it now. Guys, this is now, a year, almost 2 years later after release. Let's kind of go back to the very beginning. When you were starting Resistance 2, what was the first thing that you knew you had to do with Resistance 2?
Co-op. Simple. I mean, when we were doing our presentations for Resistance 1 in the very beginning, that was the number one question we got was, why don't you have online co-op? We had co-op, but people wanted to be sure that they could play with their buddies online.
Was Resistance originally a trilogy?
Well, if we want to go back all the way to the beginning, Resistance was a space opera. And we ended up with a story that involved time travel and I think flying ships through big holes in asteroids. And then when we moved back to Earth and decided to set it in this alternate 1950s universe, I don't think we talked about a trilogy. I don't remember.
I don't remember. I think we're just trying to get the first one done.
Yeah, that's true. We're thinking about PlayStation 3 launch.
Exactly.
First-person shooter. We haven't done this in a long time. Let's see if we can actually make a compelling story for one game, right? But just to qualify, I mean, I say this a lot in interviews. We don't ever set out to do a game where the story can't be continued. I mean, we want to create franchises and not just one-off games.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the other focuses, and we're going to get into some of the early decisions that we made. Jeremy Patrick asked on Facebook, how'd you go about choosing which sites and cities would be in the game?
Actually, that's one of the most fun aspects, in my opinion, of beginning the game, is when you have a blank canvas and you start thinking about all the cool places you can go. And that's the approach we've taken for a lot of our games in the past. You know, when we talk about Ratchet, it's what planets would be really cool to visit.
Yeah.
And then, at least from my memories, we start constructing the story and the gameplay around that. Going from making games in 1 year to 2 years was an attempt to make it a little bit easier, but what we ended up doing was expanding the scope for our games. And so for Resistance 2, it had a massive scope, 60-player, multiplayer, 8-player online co-op, a really big single-player campaign.
13-hour campaign.
Yeah, and so we bit off a lot, and when we took into account the fact that we lost basically 6 months by starting over with our code base, it did create this frantic pace where we were all just trying to get everything in that we could. Instead of saying from the very beginning, okay, we got 12 big ideas for this game, we're going to make them all work, and we got lots of people, so no problem, let's go.
Everybody run.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I think it's super exciting. I think Insomniac's history, though, is frantically making excellent games.
Yeah.
And I think it's awesome. It's going to be awesome to see what we're able to do with 3 years instead of, the Ratchet games were all made in 1 year cycles.
Yeah.
Now we've shifted to the 2 year, but even that's a small team and a big team. I think that seeing what we can do in 3 years is going to be fantastic.
So let's talk about one of the other kind of big things, because I remember the focus for Resistance 2 was a lot of the things we said were hail and scale.
I think we delivered on scale, for sure. I mean, that was the whole idea behind these bosses.
Leviathan,
Leviathan was a totally unique experience, yeah.
You hadn't, I think, at that point seen anything like that in a first-person shooter. Right. I mean, period. And I don't know if even to this point, I don't think you have seen any other shooter attempt something that big.
It made a good E3 demonstration, especially for the Insomniacs, who knew exactly what was going on as I was up there on the stage playing.
I'm Ted Price, President and CEO of Insomniac Games, and this is Resistance 2.
At the time, the Leviathan demo was carefully timed, so that if you messed up, everything would basically come to a grinding halt. And so I was up on stage and we had no backup. It was basically me just playing through the demo, hoping that things were going to go well.
And talking at the same time.
Yeah. And I got stuck on a couch. And I practiced this thing like 100 times, right? And practiced not getting stuck. And I got stuck on the same damn couch. And I was thinking, okay, I have about a second to get unstuck before the game basically doesn't crash, but ends. And it would have been the worst demo in the history of E3 had that happened.
And of course, everyone was in Ratchet conference room at the time watching Tag going, oh my god, oh, he's off the couch. She's off the couch.
Yeah. I just felt bad for the environment artist you fired for that. That's not true. That's not true. That's a joke. The last question, I guess, for all three of you is, looking back on it now, how do you view Resistance 2 and how is it shaped, I guess, where you're hoping to go with Resistance 3? And you don't have to get too specific about Resistance 3 because we haven't talked about it much yet, but what are kind of the main things you learned and think about when you think about Resistance 2 now?
Wow, you didn't put that one on the list. I didn't think about that. You want to go first?
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, sure.
I think focus on a theme and make it work really well is something that I think we wanted to do with Resistance 2 in America, and I think we learned a lot more about how to do that well, and we're taking that ahead to Resistance 3. That's one thing I'll contribute.
Yeah, I think just kind of reining in the ideas a little bit and focusing a little bit more on quality instead of trying to do everything.
Yeah.
Jake, last chance.
Last chance.
Wax poetic.
Yeah. I guess for me, Resistance 2 was really a great experience. I mean, I think that everybody was working on their own thing, and it really felt like we brought it together at the end. I didn't really get a chance to play a whole lot of single player until the end, but when I did, it was really a great experience. And again, we all had this scale, this underlying notion of scale, and that was something that I think permeated each of the modes and kind of gave a consistent feel throughout them that we were pushing size and scale. And I also think we intentionally pushed the limits of each of the modes, things that had never been done before in either co-op, competitive, or single player. So I think that is something that I'll always be proud of, as far as really not being content with the status quo and trying to do something different and really push the boundaries of what people expect.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The only thing I can add to that is I was really happy with how the whole Hale story turned out. I think that from the beginning we were wondering who this guy is, and we set out to make a character with an emotional arc that would create some sort of emotional connection with the person who was playing him. And then we, of course, ripped that emotional connection out at the very end. But to me, it was fully realized. And I hope players appreciated it.
I think, given the amount of questions we get about Hale and R3, I would say that came out. Because if people are asking and care, then that means that there was definitely some emotional attachment during Resistance 2, even though he's dead. Well, that's all for this special retrospective episode on Resistance 2. We'll be back soon with another interesting episode about something that we'll think up in the near future, because I don't know what it's going to be next time. But stay tuned soon, and we'll be back next time with another episode of The Full Moon Show. Later. A lot of fun. Yeah. Tyler Campbell says, 10,000 kills trophy. Grrr.
This is where I dive under the table and say, not me.